now the podcast starts.
Hello, dear listener. This is TD Velasquez, but as always, you can call me Dan. Happy Halloween weekend. We're back. This is the beginning of the second series of And Now the Podcast Starts. Now, I've decided to call it the second series. Our first series finished in early 2021. We've done a ton of episodes since then. Well, maybe not quite a ton, but a few. But they were kind of scattered and randomly released irregularly. So, therefore, I don't think it was really a series. Now, though, we are going to be back on a weekly basis into the new year at least. So, I thought that this could be our series too. We're rarely going to be the four main hosts all together now. It's kind of going to be more rotating. So this episode there'll be three of us, next week there'll be two, and it'll change from week to week. As in the previous series, we're going to be joined by some occasional special guests and special guest hosts, and we're going to be looking into some of our regular strands of interest, such as questions of horror, such as revisitations of classic movies, such as missed classics that certain of us have never got round to seeing somehow. And we may eventually get back to some of our early drivers, such as looking at the films of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and looking at the latest two Halloween movies. As you may remember, we put a lot of effort into covering all of the Halloween movies when there were only 11 of them. But now there are 13 of them, and some of us, including myself, have not got round to seeing the most recent two, so we're not in a position to talk about them yet. But we are going to do that. I have to confess, if you're wondering, sure, I'm a fan of those movies, and I've devoted a lot of my life to them, but I've heard such mixed things about the most recent pair that I'm not sure I can bear to watch them just yet. I'm biding my time, but we will cover them eventually. I'm just not sure when. But there'll be plenty of other things that we'll be talking about in the meantime. This week on the show, I am going to be joined in just a few moments by film tutor and writer Kirsty and writer and critic Ian Winterton to discuss this year's movie Men by director Alex Garland. Now, if you've never heard of or seen Men, then I can give you a sum up of its content. I say its content rather than its plot, because it's not really a plot-driven film, as you'll discover. The movie concerns a young widow by the name of Harper Marlowe, played by Jessie Buckley, recovering from the recent traumatic apparent suicide of her husband James, played by Papa Asiadu. She travels to a remote English village called Cotson, where she's spending a period of recovery. She rents a house there. However, all is not quite what it seems in the village, and her trauma is going to haunt her through the movie, particularly in terms of her relationships with all the men in the village, who are eerily similar. In fact, they're all played by one actor, Rory Kinnear, although Harper doesn't really seem aware of this at first. But the events in the film become progressively more nightmarish and more related to her initial trauma. Now, a few months ago, Kirsty and I discussed the teaser trailer for this movie, so I'm not going to play that. It's a quite oblique teaser trailer, but here is the full trailer for the movie, which gives you a bit more of a sense of what it's like. And following this, Kirsty, Ian and myself will discuss the movie in spoiler-free fashion for 20 minutes or so, and then following that we're going to go into full spoilers. I will put a time code in the show notes to let you know where the spoilers are going to come in if you want to avoid them. So, enjoy.
Hello.
Hi.
Mrs. Marlowe, yes?
Harper, yes.
Do, come in.
The words I have to say.
It's a beautiful house.
But they're
Would it just be you staying? Or?
Excuse me?
Mrs. Marlowe?
No.
Until you give your love, there's nothing more that we can do.
Apple from the garden?
Yeah, it was delicious.
No. Mustn't do that. Forbidden fruit.
Oh, God, sorry,
I'm joking.
Oh.
You're tormented.
Feels more like...
Haunted.
Yeah. Something happened. My husband went upstairs to our balcony and let himself go.
You must wonder why you drove him to it.
Why? I didn't drive him to it.
I thought it to be true. But if you had given him the chance to apologize, he'd still be alive.
What? A man followed me out of the woods. He was stalking me.
What makes you say that?
I saw him twice.
Twice. I don't know if he saw you once.
Want to play a game? You hide, I'll see.
You must feel an awful sense of guilt.
Stay away from me. What are you doing now? What are you?
Okay, so dear listener, to discuss Men, I have here Kirsty Warrow. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello.
You and I discussed the trailer for this a few months ago, and you sent me a you sent me a message saying, "Can we discuss the trailer for Nope and Men? I'm really excited about it." And I said, "What's Nope and Men? Never heard of it." But at least I now know the answer, half the answer to that question. I haven't seen Nope yet, but so
yeah, I have seen both. So yeah, I will.
I've not seen Nope either.
Oh, well, it's rejected Ian. I hadn't introduced you, so we're also joined by Ian Winterton. God bless you. Say hello, Ian.
Hello, I haven't seen Nope.
You actually missed the opportunity to say hello, Ian.
You know what? I was listening to a podcast the other day. I've listened to a few episodes of it. I won't name it. And I got really irritated by the hosts doing that at the beginning of every single one, and it's put me off. Put me off. But
so that is a dead joke now.
It's a dead joke. I will never do it again. It's not funny, even ironically, because I've heard doing it ironically too often.
Okay, it is an ex joke. Okay, we don't need to do that joke. Okay.
Call me an ambulance. You're an ambulance. It's there.
Right. Surely you can't be serious, but anyway. Right, so we are talking about Men. Kirsty, I think you wanted to talk about it before you'd seen it, and we discussed Alex Garland and your love for Alex Garland stuff on the show before. But Ian, it was actually yourself who kind of prompted us to do this, because you decided you so wanted to see the film, you bought the DVD. What can I ask? What prompted you to jump on it?
Because Alex Garland, I guess I'm a fan in that his movies are always interesting. I'm always glad they've been made. I don't. We'll come on to what I think about his individual films and this film, but it just looked really cool, and I heard it got very mixed reviews, and I just thought it looks. I love a bit of folk horror, and I love Rory Kinnear, and it looked lovely, and I really loved. You know, I've never hated anything Alex Garland's done. So I thought that's worth $9.99 or whatever it was from Tesco's. And then we actually watched it at your house, in the real world on your projector. So it was extra special.
Can I say that obviously it was lovely to have you come round to my house, which had never happened before, and we got to watch this film on the projector while eating a massive pizza which you brought with you. So that we got to
boys' night.
Yes, it felt like a true cinema experience because it was on a nice big screen, but also we had huge amounts of pizza.
Yeah.
So it was incredibly pleasurable from that point of view.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just explain my?
We weren't watching a Michael Bay movie. We were watching an Alex Garland movie.
No.
Yeah.
While eating pizza and chugging lager.
But, yes, we struck a balance. Kirsty, what were you going to say?
I just thought it might be nice to sort of contrast my experience watching Men. So I watched Men at the cinema, I think the day it came out, with a load of my students because we study Ex Machina for one of their exam papers, and part of what they have to consider is the idea of, maybe potentially the films that we study as being products of auteurs. So, obviously I talked to them about, kind of his oeuvre, his themes and his kind of aesthetics, and then we went to see Men to see whether or not it fit in, but most of them kind of, again, no spoilers, kind of came out just, they looked like they completely shell shocked. Just like, what have I just watched?
Having seen the film,
wonderful.
I wouldn't entirely blame them for that response. So let's talk about it in a spoiler-free fashion for 20 minutes.
And imagine. So, what age are your students? Are they A-level age?
Yeah.
I'm going to be very generational and say, so I assume they've probably watched a lot of Marvel movies and they're just about to embark on their sort of cinematic. Because I remember going to uni, and I had that when I was 18 at uni was when I started watching actual good movies.
Yeah, I think the ones
because I was told to.
The ones who decided, because it wasn't we didn't make them go. The ones who came were the sort of slightly more cine-literate ones anyway. Yeah. So they're kind of But even not massive Marvel fans, I would say. But yes, certainly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe a film like this, which makes even people that watch lots of films go, "What the fuck am I watching?"
Yeah.
Imagine it must have been brilliant to like I remember showing my students Eraserhead, and they looked at me like I was a pervert from there on.
Well, yeah. Well, on my course they'd already done Chandelier and L'Arche d'Or and Caligari, so they're fairly kind of okay with weird stuff.
I would expect nothing less from you, Kirsty, to be honest.
Sorry?
I would expect nothing less from you, bless you.
I'm so glad that I think that's what you think. I'll take that one.
I remember being the only person in my sixth form media studies class who'd seen Eraserhead before we started term, and having a bit of a quick rapport with the tutor because I knew about things like that. But yes, most of the people in the group would not have been able to take that film in the early stages of A-levels, just as they wouldn't probably have responded very well to Men. It might have been a bit of a shock. So let's talk a little spoiler-free about what we think about the film and whether we would recommend it to people or how we recommend people should approach it. I think, Kirsty, you should take the lead on this. So I think
ladies first.
Well, that seems appropriate.
It seems appropriate. Like just commenting to Dan before Ian about feeling sort of slightly outnumbered on this discussion. So
well, how fitting.
Yeah, I know, indeed. But maybe we should just just lose one of you and just have four of you.
I look like Dan now.
Yeah. So I kind of a fan of Alex Garland's work generally. I find his his style and his themes and what he's got to say about the world kind of quite interesting, and it resonates with me. And he's obviously somebody who likes to play with the feminist kind of themes and ideas and purports to kind of or subscribe to those values. So that kind of I like. When I saw the trailer for Men, I it spoke to me because it's English countryside and pagan imagery and folk horror and horroriness, and it's by Alex Garland. So I was intrigued and excited, and curious about the resonance of the title. I also love Rory Kinnear, who is just brilliant in everything that I've seen him in.
He is.
So I was very excited about that. So I'm kind of pleased to say that the film for me didn't disappoint. It's really nice to see pagan symbols not being used as just kind of solely as images of evil within a film, and it playing with those images kind of more thoughtfully. I liked its ambiguity. I like the fact that it's clearly highly symbolic. Not, I know that was one of the criticisms I kind of read about the film at the time. Was it's just the kind of metaphors are so obvious, but I didn't find that they were, there's room for interpretation within, I think, what he was trying to say with the film, and the space that he left for different kind of readings or different symbolisms. I really liked. I thought it looked beautiful, like the use of kind of the green and the red, which really reminded me of Vertigo, actually, just in terms of the the kind of oppositional colours.
Oh, interesting.
I don't want to, so much what I want to say sort of involves spoilers, so I don't want to talk so much. Jessie Buckley I thought was amazing, and her dress, that pink dress with the black trim, oh my gosh. I spent most of the film going, this is a brutal film that says lots of really interesting things, but where can I get that dress?
she is amazing. She's a fantastic screen presence, and so is Kinnear, and basically they have to be great because there's not a lot of competition in this film.
No.
I was about to say how spoilerific it is to say who Kinnear plays.
Well,
is that in the trailers?
It is in the trailers.
It's well known that Kinnear plays more than one character.
That's all right then.
Yeah.
We can go that far.
All of the male characters except for one, doesn't he? That's except for James.
I guess so. Are there not even any maybe a couple of extras who are male?
No.
Because there's a couple of small female characters who just have a couple of lines, like the police officer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a police officer, and then there's her friend, and then that's kind of it. And that I kind of like the sort of scope of it in terms of it does fit, it has that really contained sort of feel that a lot of British horrors do.
Yeah.
And it made me think about have we talked about Borderlands?
No, not in detail. We haven't mentioned it. But
yeah, it kind of I think that's sort of the emphasis on the church setting and the sort of kind of the way that. Yeah, I mean, they're two very, very different films, but the men's kind of use of sort of cosmic horror aesthetics I really liked as well. I just sort of sense of horrible, creepy, universal, celestial.
Yeah,
it's really intriguing.
It's an interesting thing that cosmic horror and folk horror kind of are the same, but feel very different. But there's an intersection going on. They're all about the kind of the relationship between the human and the universal, I suppose. But in different, they use different kinds of nature. Ian, what can you say in a non-spoiler way about your thoughts on the film?
I didn't know who Jessie Buckley was because I'm an old man. I'd never heard of her before.
You're not alone, Ian. When I first saw Jessie Buckley, it was only 4 years ago when she was in Judy with Renée Zellweger, and I thought, who's that very good supporting actress? There's something about her, she'll go far. And then looked her up and realised she's already a massive star and a sad lead roles in tons of independent films and is a musician, and she's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, in a similar way, when It's a Sin came out, and then suddenly Ollie Alexander was duetting with Elton John, I was like, how the hell has that happened? And because I didn't realise Ollie Alexander was a very famous pop star.
Well,
before he was in It's a Sin. So I think of all the things, I think music has fallen away first in my getting old. I do not listen to new music. It's weird because I got into music late. like I was the sort of kid that got bored of music if it was on Swap Shop or whatever, and wasn't into it till I was like 16, and now it's the first thing to go. Is how it feels. I'm just not bothered about music or going to gigs. I used to like it, and now I couldn't give a shit. Anyway, slight diversion.
Slight tangent.
Tangent. Yeah. Men. It's weird. It's been 2 weeks since we watched it, and I'm still processing it. Which is quite a thing to say for a movie. I think largely I like the feel of it, and I like the idea of it, and that's quite common response for me to an Alex Garland joint. I like the idea of it sometimes more than the execution of it. And with this, I thought there's so many good things and good elements, and I still trying to work out in the service of what exactly. Was it entirely satisfying as a movie for me? I don't think it was, because I laughed when I don't think I was supposed to laugh, and so did you, Dan. So don't sit there pretending you didn't.
Well,
there were some elements. I was like, this is funny, and I don't think it's supposed to be funny. There's things being grotesque and a bit what the fuck, and then there's dipping into, this does look like a funny Aphex Twin video now. Not to say there would, I mean, basically, typical fashion, I'm homing in on the negative. I also loved loads of things about it.
And I think it's fair to say, Ian, we were sufficiently uncertain about the things that you've just mentioned that we don't really even know whether it was inappropriate to laugh at certain points. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I mean, for me, I'll give a very short review. I think it's worth seeing. I think it's beautiful. The cinematographer Rob Hardy has been Alex Garland's cinematographer since at least Ex Machina. And his work is always beautiful. The music by Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury. My favourite band is Portishead, by the way. Jeff Barrow is from Portishead. I am just elated that he's got a late stage career in movies. It's really atmospheric. I think the fact that you were with me and we were eating pizza went a long way to it being a very pleasurable cinematic experience. But, I enjoyed the movie a lot. Kinnear is brilliant. Yes, at the end there was a kind of sense of what was that meant to add up to. However, there are some images in it that there's a lot of beauty and a lot of dark imagination that's straightforwardly recommendable. There's also some kind of gonza gruesomeness, which kind of reminds me of Brian Yuzna sort of 1980s body horror stuff, which I think is probably it's kind of got to be seen, even though I'm not sure if I needed to see it, but I'm not sure I'll watch it again, but I'm glad it's in the movie.
The DVD cover was full of the word groundbreaking and outstanding, and then when you dig down into those reviews, they're talking about the special effects, because they are groundbreaking and outstanding special effects. There's absolutely there's no question about that. It is worth seeing for the special effects, if nothing else, and it's worth seeing for lots of other things.
That's a rare thing.
I think the main thing is it doesn't add up to a story that much for me. Not quite. Discuss. And then when the bits it does have as a story feel a little bit too slight. Like, I don't give a shit about relationship stuff if you're talking about humanity in relation to the infinite and nature and everything. So it's a bit like, I don't know, like Midsummer suffered from this. I loved the look of Midsummer, and it was very, very funny and horrific. But it came down to a sort of teen, my boyfriend's being a bit, and it was a bit, can we not be a bit bigger than that? It's the fucking Wicker Man is what you're trying to, the Wicker Man's not worried about relationships and teenage bullshit like that. It's bigger. So I don't know. It's so ultimately, I'm glad I saw it, and I won't be eBaying my DVD. because I wouldn't mind sticking on and freaking my kids out like I did with Midsummer. And
Ian, you've shown Midsummer to your kids.
No, you've got a very small child.
When he was the middle child when he was 12. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Not my 7-year-old. I'm not mad. But
Just making
Midsummer,
sure.
he just thought he was there going. I mean, he did nearly throw up at the midpoint, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm gonna have to turn this off. I said, do you want to turn it off? He went, no. But he literally looked like he was shell shocked after it. It's absolutely brilliant. And he was just running around telling all his friends they've all got to see it on Netflix since. So I've started a craze for 12-year-olds watching Midsummer.
Well, we're probably going to need to move into spoilers shortly, so let's just have a couple more thoughts. I'll say something, and then Kirsty, if you want to say, if you've got anything spoiler free that you still haven't said, then you know. Well, let me say my bit. I would just say that with regard to the Midsummer thing, and I think it applies to men as well, it's kind of a question of which end of the telescope you're looking down, as in whether the emotional story being told is bigger than the universe, if you know what I mean, from the point of view of the person it's happening to. And I would also say that this movie, we talked about special effects being extraordinary, things like that. I think that makes it generically extraordinary, because you don't get that sort of thing mostly in folk horror. Folk horror is mostly about atmosphere and mystery, which is one of the reasons I love it. But this kind of goes into something else, and I think that's an interesting kind of juxtaposition. So it's a film I definitely watch, if only to have conversations about. You know, it's definitely worth talking about. Kirsty, is there anything you'd like to say before we go spoiler?
It's a difficult one, actually, because Ian, what you were saying about it, you know, not finding it had a kind of a big enough story, like, and again, I kind of go back to Vertigo. Like Vertigo kind of, you know, it's like a Scorsese talked about Vertigo as sort of being like the plot is really thin. It's just this thing that you hang other things on, and I kind of think that Men is like that for me in terms of it's, you know, it's about bigger things and a sort of plausible story. But that idea of, you know, not having for you a big enough, you know, kind of resonance or whatever, or I can't remember what it was you said, but I remember the thought that I had when you were saying that is just that actually for me, and I don't want to make it gender already, but here we are. It, you know, as a woman, it feels like a really big story, like a really big, relatable, universal story that taps into, you know, something that a lot of women I know relate to, which is that sort of feeling of not feeling safe, of not feeling like you can express yourself or be in the world unbothered by men. And you know, and so there is, you know, for a lot of us, a sort of really primal fear around some of the things that the film plays with. So for me, it does feel like a really elemental, large story, even though that on the face of it, you know, it's about one woman who goes to the countryside and just won't be fucking left alone.
Yeah.
You know.
But I think as a man, I'd have been fucking terrified in that village as well.
Oh yeah.
But again,
this is one bloke and he looks the same, and you know. Yeah. I get that.
Yeah, that was one thing. Like all the men being played by Rory Kinnear, apart from, you know, her ex, from London, but that was effective. But then it was strange when we did see a woman, like the female police officer and things like that. That kind of made me go, okay, well. Yeah, there are people, and she's got a mate on the other end of the phone. So,
but also she isn't aware that they're all played by Rory Kinnear, is she? That's, you know, they're all played by Rory Kinnear for the audience's benefit, so that we can look at them all and think, these are all linked by something. It's, you know, and these characters are linked by being men. But if they were just played by a load of different male actors, we wouldn't. the connection would not be apparent to us, but because they're all played by the same
it
actor.
is men. They're all the same.
Well, I don't know if it can be read that reductively, but we'll get into that.
Well, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are probably plenty of people out there who read it exactly like that, and both both women and men, watching it, kind of looking into that. I'm not sure it's quite as simple as that, but I think it's definitely deliberately trying to occupy a symbolic and kind of dreamlike space, so that you can, as spectators, we can kind of look at it and think about it and think about what the film is saying to us and how it relates to our experiences, so that we're not.
It reminded me of going to a remote village, and this is going to come across as sort of English people, an Englishman being anti-Welsh, but this is just something that generally happened. I went to a little village when I was going to visit Portmeirion, and where we stayed was in the middle of nowhere in North Wales, and I swear I kept turning around and thinking the same bloke was following me around the pub, and I realised no, there's just a very strong DNA thread through most of the people in this pub. And that was what I was reminded of. So it was almost like, well, they all look the same because it's a small village.
Yeah.
And then, it was. I mean, basically they made the decision to go right. Let's make everyone look the same. Let's make them all played by Rory Kinnear.
Well,
and she doesn't realise.
Well, she doesn't realise because in her world they're not all played by actors or an actor. They're just people she meets. It reminds me that Garland is not unfamiliar with making a big gesture to provoke the audience into having a conversation. I remember when Dread came out, which is a movie I love, which he wrote and is not credited with directing, but is apparently the director of much of it. And people said to him, Judge Dredd is like a fascist. He's delivering summary violent justice. Why doesn't your movie deal with that theme more thoughtfully? And he just said, because it doesn't need to. You're already talking about it just because we did it. That is a valid approach, I think. Okay, shall we go into spoilers then?
Yes.
So, right. Okay.
I feel like if we're too into spoilers, we can talk about it, and I can start processing what I actually think about this movie.
Well,
just strange.
And as ever, we've all dissolve into group therapy because that's what this podcast seems to do.
Especially with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I saw Robert Kinnear's cock and balls a lot.
You should, yes.
Or CGI versions of them, anyway.
Well, maybe I think he's a method actor. He wouldn't. He'd go all the way.
It was more when he was giving birth.
Yeah, well, you saw his vagina a lot, and I don't think that was really his. But
no, that's what I mean. And the cock and balls above the vagina, I don't think it was his either. But incredible graphics.
Graphics. I think it was really him wandering around naked in the gardens, for instance. So I don't think he was shy on that front. Who wants to take point on this therapy session then?
Well, I just wanted to start off by pointing out to the listener that the first thing that you two have talked about when it got to the spoilers zone is the kind of biological mechanics of
yes.
Well, I was but I was actually gonna. That's something that was one thing I made a note of. Was it? It's. I mean, like you said before, Dan, it's body horror, and so he's gone for body horror, and it's birth. So it's not like he's made birth this grotesque thing. So I just wonder, as a discussion, that to me, I mean, I'm not religiously pagan, but to me, I understand, birth and the goddess being rotund and pregnant and big hipped, and it's a celebration of birth. And this was like birth as an abomination. It is how it seemed. It wasn't like all happy. It was to horrify a woman.
Yeah.
It was horrifying, wasn't it? So I wonder. I mean, I'm not saying there's any easy answers, but like, It was basically going, oh look, just imagine if Rory Kinnear repeatedly gave birth to himself over and over again. How gross! Because birth's gross, disgusting, vaginas.
But was it not?
you
Was
know,
it not? The kind of the idea of the kind of masculine birth as something that's abject rather than the kind of feminine birth. I didn't feel like he was necessarily going down the route of going, oh God, birth is disgusting. It was like, here is this naked middle-aged man giving birth to a fully grown version of himself. That's pretty gross.
Again and again, yeah. But again, like I said, in the service of what? Like in the service of, we've got some cool special effects to try out.
Yeah.
What it kind of came down to.
Well,
to
I
me.
mean,
it's quite a
so-
horror movie, I thought.
He's playing with the ideas of the kind of Green Man, isn't he? And the kind of Green Man is a symbol of rebirth and fertility.
Yeah.
And then that, I mean, the way that I sort of thought about it was that it's, you know, that like it's a big conversation around how the symbols of the kind of the Green Man, the Shield and the Gig are used, and particularly around, interestingly, around churches. That there's a sort of, you know, kind of nobleness about the way the Green Man is used, where the Shield and the Gig isn't used in the same kind of way. But we have that kind of almost sort of sense of, you know, kind of the patriarchalness of it. So it just perpetuates. And yeah, in Offensive Arc, it doesn't need women to perpetuate itself. It is completely self-sustaining.
Yeah.
It was kind of how I started thinking about
That's
it.
really interesting. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense as a symbol for the perpetuation of the patriarchy. I mean, it's strange how I think Ian and I, maybe because we're men, maybe because we're just freaked out, and it switches part of your brain off. It's such an extraordinary image, but that explanation is very cogent. I'd also say, in response to Ian's point about making birth horrific, you know, there's been tons of horror movies that have made female birth horrific, and in a way, maybe this was just kind of a little bit of payback for that. It kind of
maybe.
You know, lots of women in movies have been forced to, in an undignified fashion, give birth in a horrific way to a monster or whatever. So now we're making Rory Kinnear do it, and you know.
Yeah, but again, what it doesn't marry up for me is, I don't know. I always see paganism, as I understand it, as what we're calling paganism here anyway, which is, you know, British, European rooted animism, would you call it? Because paganism technically means anything that's not Christian. But if we're talking the traditions that we know of in the British Isles and elsewhere, the Green Man and Sheila and the Gig and all that, then isn't one of the things about them that they're not very patriarchal? That they're about circles and they're about about
But
everything,
it's
about the god and the goddess and the moon and the stars and and so having the guy who, you know, I mean, the visuals were amazing. The Green Man sticking his, you know, sticking leaves in his face and just looks amazing. But then I just felt there was nothing. I felt it was very surface, because what's underneath this man who's if the whole community is into this sort of paganism, then why are they being such shithead patriarchal bastards? And why are they giving birth? And why are they harassing a woman? If they're harassing a Catholic policeman, then that makes sense, you know. But if they're harassing a nice woman from the city, why? If they're all into this cool, you know, if they're into the sort of much more healthy religion that's not all patriarchal.
But that's not. For me, it was much more. It's symbolic. It's kind of. It's not. I didn't think that it was meant to be read literally, as in here is this community of men who all look the same, who are pagan. It was just using the story, as you said, using the story to sort of to use some of those symbols, to have, you know, or to provoke thought around the meaning of those symbols and the way in which, you know, they kind of relate to historical and contemporary kind of gendered relationships.
Yeah, I didn't think any of it was to be taken literally, really. But I suppose...
Well, no.
But you don't necessarily know that from the start of the film.
No.
So therefore, it's possibly a bit disappointing when you get far into it and you go, right. So it's not gonna, it's not gonna all come together like a traditional story.
No, I mean it's more of a mood piece, wasn't it? I mean, maybe I'm just frustrated because it feels like it's going to have a story, and it doesn't have a story. I think that often doesn't matter. Like Mulholland Drive doesn't have a story; it's a mood piece. So I guess I just found this a little bit less satisfying.
Yeah, I think in comparison to his other pieces as well, I think that it definitely has less, clearly defined narrative. I think there are always things to think about and, sites for interpretation and kind of ambiguity, but I think it is definitely less.
Oh, actually, yeah, this is
readable.
This is something I wanted to ask you, Kirsty. If you didn't know that this was an Alex Garland film, would you think it was? It doesn't seem to me to have a lot in common with his other films.
No. I think it does thematically, but I don't like. And I think there's the he likes natural imagery a lot.
Yeah.
I might have guessed it was Ben Wheatley.
No, it does.
Ben Wheatley's
feel...
last movie kind of missed the mark in a similar kind of way for me.
Yeah.
Was that the one?
Yeah, no, it does. It does feel into the earth. Into the earth, yeah.
Yeah, into the earth.
The one made during the pandemic. I didn't see that.
Shearsmith. Again, it's worth saying, but for me, it wasn't quite the sum of its parts. They kind of go off. They go off the reservation in a similar kind of way that I don't mind it when a film goes off the reservation if I feel like they really fucking earned it. But there's some films go off the reservation. It's a bit like you're kind of doing that. We woke up and it was all a dream. Like you're just throwing shit, and this film was like that as well. Just throwing stuff that you just subconsciously didn't feel like it was coming out of anything earned. It felt a little bit adolescent in that way for me.
I think,
like,
there is
men and Into the Earth.
Oh, by the way, Kirsty, I don't know did you think of Debbie Beach at all while you were watching this film? Do you remember Debbie? Who was at university with us, Debbie Beach, made a film.
I didn't.
Do you remember that she made a film called Afterbirth?
She made I hadn't thought about that at all. Yeah. Actually.
in which an adult woman gave birth to herself, and it was a comment on the perpetuation, the way we perpetuate ourselves, and the same. Yeah. I guess the same mistakes was made, but it was all kind of symbolic. And this film felt very similar.
Which film was that?
It was
a student film.
A short film that
I see, right.
A student friend of ours made when we were at uni. So.
So she was ahead of her time. Yeah. Well, I always want to kind of just kind of go back to what Ian was saying, in that I do get what you're saying though about the kind of the way that it doesn't, or and I think in some ways there's a sort of pleasure in not knowing exactly what it is that we're meant to think or what it's trying to say. But I also think that there's also, and I think some of his other work also suffers from this, which is the kind of the feminist values, but as written by a white middle class wealthy male who wants to have those values, but it ends up not saying anything that's particularly revolutionary, or and can we talk about the ending?
Of course we can.
About what you made of the ending.
About what we made of the ending, or what?
Yeah. Right. No, I'm just gonna really, because I know what I made of the ending, but I'm just really interested to know what you made of the because ultimately he keeps giving birth to himself, and then back in the house it's James is sort of reincarnated.
Yeah, he's rebirthed. Yeah, her ex is the ultimate person given birth to. Which, and I suppose that, I mean, Ian, you can go into more detail on this. I think you'll be more articulate. I think I was just kind of, my chin was on the floor. I was a bit gobsmacked by the imagery.
I'm just thinking the same. I'm making the same sort of landed fish kind of Because I'm trying to. I don't think it landed with me, especially that her ex came back. It hasn't stayed in my head.
Well, before you go into it, Ian, I just kind of thought, so what is being said is that because obviously the toxic relationship with her ex has traumatized her and haunted her throughout the film, and now we see that her ex is birthed from these men, and symbolically that meant to me, so he was a product of this system which is just going on. And in a way that was kind of a disappointing ending and a bit depressing, you know.
Men, they're all the same.
Well, because it could be reduced to that. What did you think, Kirsty?
For me, it's just the kind of final moment really was struck me, and actually the kind of scenes with James that sort of bookend the film. Well, not bookend the film because I know they kind of, but they, you know, it feels like that's the you know, the kind of argument with James which leads to his suicide, and then the end scene, or you know, so yeah, bookends. And with, so just processing, and I'm going to get personal now, so this is where we're into group therapy. The bit at the beginning where, you know, obviously they're arguing and she's trying to kind of, you know, end the relationship, and he says, if you break up with me, I'll kill myself.
Really powerful scene.
It is really powerful. And what I know from personal experience and from talking to female friends is, you know, that a lot of us have been in that situation where that has been a threat that has been made, and that's, you know, that's really to sort of see that writ large. You know, I can't think of other films that have done that, but I felt like that felt like a really sort of resonant moment for me personally, and I know for others. And then at the end, when he kind of comes back, and there's a moment, and I haven't seen the film as recently as you guys have, but my recollection of it is, you know, it's like they both sort of sit down, and she asks him what he wants, and he just sort of gives her this sort of like knowing look, and what it felt is that like all of that abuse and that torture and the demand for attention that we get all the way through from these men towards her is just that, you know, it's just that sort of sense of wanting attention and wanting, you know, acceptance and ultimately love, despite all of the kind of abuses. And that just, you know, that felt like it wasn't like surface level, like, oh, here's the final moment, and you know, fuck off at the cinema. But it felt like a really, for me, kind of like, God, that's depressing. But if that for me is, you know, or at least again, and I know other people have read this that way, that sort of sense of, gosh, really? Is that, then this is how you're going about getting our approval and our attention?
So
or
did you feel like it was
and
ultimately sympathetic towards that kind of man then, in saying that he meant well, really?
No, I don't think he means well. I just think that, you know, that there's certainly a reading about the way in which the system encourages gendered relationships.
But for me, what seared into my brain was when you said the ending. For me, the ending is obviously her mate turning up and her mate being pregnant, and so Jessie Buckley's character sort of breaks free of whatever the nightmare, and goes off with her mate. So she gets rid of the toxic men. But goes off with a pregnant friend. So ultimately, it's quite an uplift. Well, I mean, if it had a narrative that had carried me, it would probably be an uplifting ending. As it was a series of stuff that happened for the last 50 minutes, which, so you know, so it was for me. I felt like I kept thinking of the Aphex Twin videos. Like, I don't mind the Aphex Twin videos; they're amazing. But you're not watching that to go, oh, what's the story going on in this? You're watching it for a series of cool videos, just fucked up music. And I felt a bit like I've just watched a 90-minute version that didn't really matter about the story. because I was just watching a bunch of fucked up images.
Yeah.
And they were very good fucked up images, but I don't know. I mean, you have to be careful not to start reviewing a film in the sort of what I would have done is, because there's nothing worse than that. But I don't massively think, I don't know. It's like he half did a story and then he kind of went, oh, there's loads of shit that doesn't really make sense, but it doesn't matter. Is how it felt. He might be able to sit there and go, this is exactly what I meant. But I didn't feel like I was in. I didn't feel like I was in the presence of someone who knew what was going on in their own film. Well, is what it felt like.
If I may be permitted to psychoanalyze Alex Garland for a minute, I'd like your take on this. I feel like he's still apologising for Ex Machina, in the sense that Ex Machina is a very good film. I like it. I've seen it more than once.
I'd say that was one of his. I'd say that's probably his best film.
Well, maybe, but I remember he got a lot of criticism for being misogynist, and at first I didn't get it, and I thought, hang on, it's got an interesting female character. It's got a kind of complicated discussion of relationships. But then I realised, oh, wait a minute, it's a movie which is trying to comment on male-female relationships that has no women in it, because the only women in it are androids built by men. So then he does Annihilation, which is an all-female military team. And I like Annihilation. I just remember there's no real reason in the plot why this needs to be an all-female team, is it? Maybe it is in the original book, I don't know. But I just thought, he kind of, it's like a balancing thing. He's like, oh, there were no women in my last film, so I'm going to have mostly women in this film. And now he's still trying to. He's trying to find different ways of connecting to the female audience.
I mean, we're straying into talk about Ex Machina, but I don't buy that idea that there's no women in Ex Machina, because he didn't build a fucking android. It's a female character. It's like saying, oh, most of the people in Blade Runner aren't real. Because they're androids. She's still a female character. The characters, the men in Ex Machina are horrible cunts. Sorry. I'm sorry. But they're horrible misogynists. He says, using that horrible word.
They are, but the point that I'm making is that the movie doesn't have a female viewpoint.
But it has an android. He's been built. He's been built by the male gaze, and then she breaks free. So I've got a lot less problem with Ex Machina. Ex Machina, I'd say, is his most satisfying film.
No, it is. What I'm saying, I'm not criticising it as a narrative, and like you say, we don't want to get too deep into it because we're talking about men. But the story is fine, but the point of view, it's a story all about men. Which feels like it's about women, but it's not. It's all about men. It's about how they see each other and what they try and create. And Kirsty, go on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just go back to the kind of criticism of Ex Machina. I totally get that. I mean, I kind of that there's a sort of sense with Ex Machina that he's trying to have his cake and eat it in terms of commenting on the male gaze whilst also using the male gaze.
Yes.
And so it is a bit problematic from that perspective. I disagree with the idea that there are no female characters, because I do think, whilst there are limited characters overall, they're all clearly gendered, whether or not they're real or, or the gynoids or not. But for this one, I felt much less like it was and I think maybe this is because it is so kind of ambiguous in what it's trying to do. I felt less like it was a male writer writing a female character. For me, as a female spectator, it felt much more I could find more truth in it. There's a beautiful scene at the beginning where she goes she's exploring the area. She goes off on a nature walk, which is something I do, if I can, daily. And that sort of sense of the background threat of men existing in those spaces as something that is potentially threatening is something that, again, I deal with every day in my life. Yeah,
I love those sections. I love the first half of the film. Basically, it's just when it became it's when it became apparent to me that this was just going to not actually have a story. When anyone can set something up to feel like it's going to have a story.
Yeah.
What's really hard to do is actually have a story, and he decided not to bother. Is how it seemed to me.
But does it need a story though? I mean, for me, it did.
So I guess it was a mood and it was a theme. It was basically, I don't know. If that's what he wanted to do with all this stuff, then I guess that was his choice. But I found it less than satisfying because of that.
Okay.
Like you say, we talk about Vertigo. Vertigo's got a really good fucking plot that you hang all these things off. This didn't have a really good plot. It just has a theme and a mood, and then a sort of feels like a setup, and then it just sort of fades away. That's not. That might be good in some ways, but it doesn't make it amazing. It makes it a film that's not as good as it could have been for me.
I do think it was to a certain extent it was a good character piece and an exploration of this one woman and her trauma. All the guys, in a way, if you wanted to interpret it in a literal way, I mean, it would be something horribly simple, like, it's all in her head or whatever. But the fact is that the male characters in it are not important in the way she is. We're getting her viewpoint, even though weirdly we see that all the men are the same and she can't. But we are working through her trauma at the same time as she is, and I think that's the most successful stuff. I think you really feel with her, and you feel what she goes through. And like you say, Kirsty, I think it feels authentic. I don't think she feels like she's a puppeted character by a male writer. I think she feels like a real person. It's just kind of the mechanics of what's going on around her that are, let's say, perplexing. But at the same time, do you need a really complex story when it's essentially this? If the film has a story, it's woman is learning to deal with ingrained trauma and and
it doesn't need a complex story, but it needs a story, not just the beginning of a story and then no ending.
Can I connect this to? So I was just thinking, Dan, as you were talking, it's sort of, I don't know why, but my brain is only just connecting these things down. As it felt a little bit like Antichrist.
Oh, right.
In that, with Antichrist is also about kind of dealing with trauma. For me, where Antichrist fell down as a film was when it, in the second half, gave itself over too much to genre.
Okay.
When it becomes sort of, kind of a couple, one attacker, one victim,
right?
And into the kind of violence. And I think that, for me, whilst it was spectacular and was clearly, kind of ideologically quite rich in terms of what I felt I could see in it, that it did fall down for me a little bit when we get into that kind of, home invasion section.
Okay.
As stylish and as impressive as it was, it did feel a little bit like, okay, we're just, he's leaning into the genre element, whereas, potentially there was a more interesting way through that part of the film. That could have still ended up with Rory Kinnear repeatedly giving birth to himself.
Yes. Yeah.
But that, kind of the bit with the priest in the bathroom was a bit, and then the kind of boy as well.
Let's just say, because we can only say this in spoilers, it's not a very rich thing, kind of very deep thing to observe. But I loved the recurrent image of as Ian termed it, the bifurcated hand, and the way that
Yes.
all the characters are linked by having this split open hand. And also, I really like the character, the sort of nice posh knob. I think Mark Kermode described him
Jeffrey.
as Tim Nice but dim. Yes, Jeffrey. Yeah, he is quite nice and sympathetic. And
until he's not.
Well,
I kept thinking of Harry Enfield and Chums a lot when I was watching this, mixed with maybe a bit of Monty Python.
Yeah.
And I think that's where
Little Britain you mentioned
where it
as well,
also
Ian.
lost me a bit. A little bit of what?
Little Britain
Sorry?
you mentioned.
Yeah, Little Britain. Yeah, that was the one that I said while we were watching it. So, there were quite a lot of things pulling in different directions, and that makes for a fucked up film. But I'm questionable of how much of that was intentional and how much of it was just we've got some mad stuff, we're just gonna throw it out and see what effect it has on the. I don't know. I'm not convinced that Garland had complete control over this movie, or had, the effects this movie were having were intended. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, does he think it's as funny and stupid as I do? Like, some of it was just.
I would pay money for to sit down and listen to Alex Garland and you talk about this for possibly in a boxing ring.
I've never met the man, but I'm quite intimidated by him. So I don't know if it would be a fair argument. Because I just get the impression he could probably punch me. I don't know why I think that, but maybe it's just. But yeah, I find him a very frustrating filmmaker, because it's like every time one of his movies comes out, I'm like, that sounds right up my street, and then most of the time it isn't quite right up my street. It's like it's almost there, and and I think Ex Machina was almost the one where it got the closest, and Devs I really liked on TV as well, except again it came down to quite a small thing, all this big stuff, but it came down to some guy with a beard who wanted to keep his daughter going.
Yeah. He's really interested in grief though.
Yeah, but I think there's too much of this sort of stuff in modern movies, where they have the big thing and it's like I don't know, I'm going to start slagging off Tarantino again, but it's like Tarantino is like Scorsese. No, he isn't. Scorsese's much better and much deeper. Tarantino's hollow and surface, and the same with fucking Christopher Nolan. I can't stand his films, and they're clever films for stupid people.
Sound bites.
Because you watch. Because what's been in my head all the way through this has been, people go, oh wow, have you seen Interstellar? It's so deep. No, it fucking isn't. It's like it's Generations 2001. No, it comes down to love is quantifiable. It's not big and huge and universal, and they're checking their fucking emails when they're I hate it. And it's the same sort of smallness. You don't need, when you make The Wicker Man, you don't need to go, I wonder what his girlfriend's doing. I wonder what he's doing. You just kind of have it there. He's a big fucking, big archetype having a very simple story that feels like an amazing mood. And this plot, like Vertigo, carries us all the way to the end, and we go, oh shit, he's been burnt alive in a Wicker Man. And these films that think they're so clever don't do the basic stuff as well, is kind of my general takeaway. Things don't quite work for my tastes. They all look amazing, and I like lots of Interstellar, and then I was ultimately going, for fuck's sake. And I just have that feeling so often with so many films. They're all surface and they're all so small in their outlook, even though they're pretending to be big. But Alex Garland isn't quite in that camp. He is, but the end of Devs. Did you find Devs a bit disappointing? I mean, I loved it, and I was watching it as a TV thing. But then the ultimate, this is why he's doing it, felt a bit. Could he not be doing it for the big reason?
Yeah, but I would think that the big reasons are. Yeah, but it's human though, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
He's trying to solve a really human, relatable kind of emotional problem, albeit in a fucked up, bizarre sci-fi way. But ultimately, and again, I think those big stories are solved, but are made sense of by the kind of human reasoning behind them. It's kind of Frankenstein, isn't it? It's like, why does Frankenstein do what he does? Like,
Well, that's why Ex Machina for me was his most successful film. And I think weirdly, like I'm sort of formulating this on the hoof, but weirdly, what people find uncomfortable about Ex Machina is probably because he wrote that script and didn't quite censor himself. And so it feels convincingly like what a bunch of tech bros would do if they could build androids. So it's more realistic, it's more emotionally true, because it's basically the likes of Zuckerberg, who are misogynistic fuckwits without knowing it, making this horrible thing and going, well, if you're going to make an android, she's got to be a babe. And they make a babe, so in the moment he wasn't worried about the misogyny of that, because those characters are misogynistic. And so weirdly, it's not a overtly misogynistic film. It might be slightly misogynistic in that the characters are, and he was probably acting a little bit more unpoliced, but he was also making those characters be much more real and the situation more real and more uncomfortable, because these horrible men who, masters of the universe, also, well, we're going to make our own version of beautiful, what we think of as beautiful. That's what the android's going to look like. And then you're left going, well, I have to cast someone who looks like that, who looks like a model to be so that's why it's more uncomfortable. I also think ultimately that's why it's much more successful as a movie. But God bless him, because he makes some crazy. They're never boring, and I'm always glad they're there. But he hasn't hit like gold that often.
But he's still quite young, though, isn't he? In terms of his career, in his directing career, he's still got time to. You talk to people about kind of Tarantino or Nolan in comparison to Scorsese, but there's like a kind of 30-year gap.
There's a good
yeah.
I think there's a good trajectory as well. I don't think he's made a bad film or written a bad film, really, but he's probably not made a really, really great one yet either. He's kind of building up.
No. I mean, it's brilliant, but for me, they're always more interesting to think about than I haven't yet been that the first half of all his films I really enjoy. And then there's just something, maybe it's just not for me, because it is a taste thing. There's a certain type of thing. But I love the way they look. I love themes he plays with. He just never quite gets there.
I think maybe Ian, building on your point about the narrative and the scripts, and also what you said in response to that, Kirsty, like a lot of these movies, such as these ones that Ian mentioned and the Nolan films and all that, it's like they have a storyline and a setup, and then they reveal what the emotional nub is, and to the writer, and I can say this because I'd probably feel like this if I was trying to write it, you kind of go, oh, we've done it, great, and maybe it needs more than that. I mean, in this film, I feel like it's missing sort of 20 minutes towards the end. I think just about where the home invasion stuff kicks in, there should be more complicated things going on that knit it all together. And then we have the multiple birth sequence, but it kind of jumps straight to that almost, and you're left going a bit, all right, is that it?
It felt like it was making it up as it went along, and we just got. It wasn't like here's this amazing, like I love Midsommar. I really love Midsommar. I've watched it so many times. I didn't like Hereditary. Even though I really liked it to start with, I didn't ultimately like it. But I just thought Midsommar was just hilarious. Like, I really liked it. It was so funny, and the energy of it, and it was and its pacing was brilliant. And when it gets to the end of Midsommar, it's just, oh yeah, you're taking your time. This is going on, and I'm going, can't believe what I'm watching, but I know where it's come from. It was earned, Yeah. And we won't spoil it because no one's tuned in. But the end of Midsommar is just that, laughing my head off and going,
with Midsommar, the kind of emotional.
And it felt earned. This was just what the fuck, but it came from nowhere. It kind of was just happening because it was now.
Well,
it's how it felt.
I know what you're saying. I think it does. The ending does grow out of what the film already was and the themes that it was exploring, and the trauma of the character. I just think it, like I said a minute ago, it just needed a few more steps to get there to feel kind of really satisfying. We've only got
that, and that shift towards the end where it sort of goes into slightly more kind of cosmic horror styling. That's the place where for me, I'd want to see more. Kind of, not sketching out, but more work around. I mean, there's an extended cut of this. I'd quite happily sit down and watch it for 3 hours. Quite happily.
Is it really 3 hours long?
No, it isn't. I'm saying if there was.
Oh, if there was
a 3 hour extended cut, I would watch that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, sometimes films have been, cut down when they shouldn't have been, and other times they're left to run too long, and this is all part of the art of it, isn't it? But I would actually, you're right. I enjoyed being in the world, and I was really enjoying it. It just it was a bit abrupt. Like we've all kind of seemed to have reached agreement on. It was a bit abrupt.
Yeah, well,
and actually I could have done with a lot more weirdness and a lot more creeping dread, and then, oh wow, we really are going into a nightmare now. And then maybe I wouldn't have minded as much. It just felt a bit abrupt. Here he comes across the lawn. I'm giving birth 50 times. At the end.
I did have the thought while we were watching that it felt like kind of pacey Tarkovsky. It reminded me of Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker and like mysterious people wandering round in woods and things. But I thought, but I'm enjoying this. It's a lot pacier because I struggle with Tarkovsky a bit. But maybe it could have done with being a bit more Tarko, as our old uni friend Kev would have said. Tarko is where it's at. So.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because I thought you said Darko because there was a little bit of Donnie Darko in not so much in this film, but just in the way that was a film that different versions of it to find the best shape of quite a weird movie.
Yeah.
And maybe what it is they didn't find the right shape. Probably from what I can see on the actual, in the script, they didn't find the right shape. Because or if they did have it in the script, they didn't shoot it at all. Or if they did shoot it, they cut it all out. So yeah, it's I don't know. For me, to be a really good film that I want to watch loads and loads of times, it has to be a bit more. For me, it feels like a Curie exercise, but it doesn't have loads of other reasons for me to really want to watch it a lot and love it. Whereas I've watched Ex Machina a lot of times.
Yeah.
It knows what it is. knows what his plot is. His plot is fairly simple. Its themes are big. It looks gorgeous, and it knows what its destination is, and it's a satisfying, 4-star movie for me. Bang.
Now, Ex Machina is a gorgeous Outer Limits episode.
Yeah.
Just works perfectly. We've only got a few minutes left, so Kirsty, is there anything you'd like to say in closing on this?
No, I've only seen the film once. I really want to see it again, and I love a film where I look at it and go, I really want to dig into, the meanings behind little bits of this and the kind of references and different things. So for me, that's my kind of takeaway. Is it's a film that I think I will enjoy, devouring. Devouring seems like the right word. More.
Yeah, I'd like
more in future and thinking about more.
I'd like to do that too, and I'd like to have another conversation with you when we've both watched it again, because I'm intrigued by what you said about Jeffrey when I said he was nice, and you said until he isn't. I mean, because although he's an objectionable guy, but I think he's fairly well intentioned. But I remember that he seems to disappear before the home invasion stuff. All the characters who are inside the house doing nasty things are not him. Obviously, it's always Kinnear, but Jeffrey's kind of disappeared, and I wondered what
is it.
He gets
is he not in the car at the end?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Right. Yeah.
She hits him with the car, didn't she?
That's true. I've forgotten that moment. Okay.
Yeah. But I think, there's too Little Britain, and obviously we haven't even mentioned Legal Gentlemen. There was too many of those sort of things in my head.
Hot Fuzz as well.
You'll never leave. We sort of said you'll never leave when Jeffrey's blocking the road. It's.
I think it's a little bit disappointing if something reminds you of so much previous stuff, and then it doesn't go on.
And those things are pastiche as well.
But also then it doesn't. I mean, but the thing is, Hot Fuzz is a pastiche, but it goes on. It goes beyond that and becomes its own thing. So now people will go, it's like Hot Fuzz, and it's become a thing. Whereas Men doesn't feel like it really fully realizes itself. It's just
and Hot Fuzz as well.
Apart from in moments.
Yeah. I think it's taking itself very seriously, which is maybe something that you can always level at Alex Garland. He takes himself a bit seriously.
Yeah. I'm okay with that, but I agree.
Not necessarily about
But... No, but it's maybe a little po-faced. I think that's why I really like Devs, because the characters. I think he's suited being on a TV series. His characters had room to breathe.
I agreed.
I'd almost say Devs was his best thing.
Yeah, I found it compulsive.
I did. Yeah. I loved it. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't entirely sold. I would like to watch it again, but I went, oh, this is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was but Men, I feel almost like mean for saying, because there's so much good stuff in it, but I feel almost mean. Can't help but feel it was dissatisfying for me.
But I think we're all saying that we'd watch it again, though, and maybe that's the point.
With someone who hasn't seen it before.
I've yet to watch it with Sven, which I'm actually really looking forward to doing.
And I wouldn't say to Kelly, because Kelly doesn't like horror movies anyway, and I don't think she'd go. Like, I've got her to watch The Exorcist, and she could appreciate that The Exorcist was a masterpiece, even though it gave her 4 panic attacks. Whereas this, she'd go, "Why did you make me watch that piece of shit?" Is probably what her response will be. I won't be thanked for putting her through this, I don't think. So I'll have to find someone else to rewatch it with.
Well, maybe we'll return to it on a future podcast, but I think
we'll mention it.
Now
we should do more Garland. I'd like to have a excuse to rewatch McKenna.
Well,
And Annihilation, I wasn't bothered by ever.
well, I think they're all
I did like the
interesting.
destination of that. Yeah.
I'd happily
Yeah.
rewatch any of them, but yeah. So maybe
I'd
that
like
will
to see
be a
Alex
thing.
Garland do a H.P. Lovecraft proper fuck off cosmic horror.
Kirsty's
3 hour
nodding.
epic.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. We'd be down for that, although I do not feel like he would, because he likes to.
Well, he did Judge Dredd and Zombie.
Yeah.
so
No, I know.
probably-
I just I think his vision for himself is very much. I'm writing this. It's mine.
Yeah.
Although Annihilation was based on a book,
Yeah.
wasn't it? So he does adapt things. I don't know how. I'm not familiar with the book, so I don't know how close it was.
You could remake The Beach as well. So, because the novel of that is just amazing. It's like a really, it launched his career because it's a amazing page turner. I'm a bit older than you guys, but it was just wow, with all the backpacking age, and this was our little amazing book. So yeah, but anyway, we
Yes.
are rambling now.
Yes, and we definitely come to the end, but I think you make a good point about Lovecraft. I think that feels like the natural halfway house between this end of what Alex Garland's done and his other stuff. So I'd be up for that.
Or
But
maybe
anyway,
something Lovecraftian that's not actually Lovecraft.
well, that
mythos.
seems to be
It's
the
his own
coming thing.
Yeah.
So let's sew it up then. Let's sew up men. Were you going to say something else there, Kirsty?
No, it's just the Lovecraftian bit isn't Lovecraft. I've got a recommendation which is it's a bit old now, but Archive 81 on Netflix.
Okay. Oh, good. Right. I'll put that in there. I've got Netflix at the moment, so that'll be fun. Okay, nice one. All right, that's a recommendation for this week. Whichever week this ends up going out.
This
on.
goes.
All right. Yeah. Okay, I hope it's still on Netflix by the time this comes out.
Yeah.
I'll check.
It should be.
Yeah.
Can we fade out to It's Raining Men? And
yes, that's a good idea.
Because I kept singing that all the way through it as well.
That's beautiful. Well, I think that the waters of It's Raining Men are reaching out our necks as we speak. So,
hallelujah!
Ears are breaking.
Bye, everybody else.
It's raining, Rory Kinnear.
Sorry about that. Well, hope you enjoyed our discussion of men. So next week I'm going to be joined by our resident Doctor of Horror, the film lecturer Stella Gaynor, to talk about the subgenre of body horror as it's appeared in cinema and television over the years. So hope you'll join us for that. In the meantime, have a nice Halloween weekend. We normally end the show with recommendations for viewing, and mine, given the occasion of this weekend, is simply to direct you all to watch the schedules of Legend, the channel formerly known as the Horror Channel on UK Freeview. It's going to be doing its marathon of Universal horror movies from the 30s and 40s. This is something that's happened before, and once again, I'll be checking some out. I think I'm going to be setting the recorder for The Invisible Man, which I think is on the Sunday before Halloween itself. But there are movies throughout the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, so check your schedules for those. And whatever you're doing on Halloween itself, which is 3 days away as I record this, I hope you have a wonderful spooky time. I had to go out yesterday delivering some leaflets and was delighted by the Halloween decorations put up by several of my neighbours in the local area. So it should be a fun time for the trick-or-treaters around where I live, and I hope that you have something similarly festive planned for your Halloween evening. Alright, have fun folks, and you'll hear more from me and Stella next week. Bye bye!
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts. Produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. Presented by Kirsty Warrow, Ian Winterton, and T.D. Velasquez. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music and to Brian Gorman for our original artwork. All dialogue and music clips from films, TV shows, and trailers are used for the purposes of criticism in the spirit of fair dealing as defined in UK law and fair use as defined in US law. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, www.andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. Or visit our Facebook pages at AndNowPod or at Lee Cushing Pod. Follow us on Twitter at AndNowPodcast or at Lee Cushing Podcast. If you'd like to donate to us, please visit patreon.com/AndNowPodcast. And now the podcast stops.